Welcome to What Not to Do. I'm Kyle Schmitz, and this is episode 34. I've got Mike Higgins with me here of the Kos Realty Group, and he's on a mission to leave each one of his kids a $1 million real estate portfolio, and he's got 4 of them. Crazy. And yet, he's got the audacity to tell you not to put money first. What the heck? You're going to love this conversation. Hold tight. We'll be right back. All right, you want to know why? Well, I'll tell you why. My why is to use my presence and my pros to inspire you to go all in on you so that you live a legacy worth leaving. Again, to use my presence and my pros to inspire you to go all in on you so that you live a legacy worth leaving. And I want to inspire 1 billion people to live a legacy worth leaving by 2030. That's 10 years. That's 100 million people per year. So let's go. Join me in this mission to help equip the world for success and inspire 1 billion people to live a legacy worth leaving. All right, we are live at the exchange. Mike's checking in to make sure that
everything's working.
Right? And it's been funny. So we've been here for almost the past hour.
Yeah.
And we, all of our gold nuggets, all of our bits of wisdom is done. Like, you guys missed it all. Like,
right. Perfect.
It was an honor for a game. But man, I'm excited. Mike and I connected. I think it was on LinkedIn. Our worlds overlap. Mike Higgins, realtor with Keller Williams in the Green Bay, Appleton area. Awesome, and it's been fun just getting to know him, dive in. I think we're like-minded in a lot of ways, and it's exciting to see the things that he's up to. 90 and 90, right? Building your legacy. I mean, there's so many things that just exciting opportunities. Mike, and maybe he'll share a little about that more as we go on. But, dude, welcome.
Hey, I am so excited to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah. Excited to have you, man. And I didn't realize this. I mean, I was talking with Mike the whole time, and he just dropped that he has got 4 kids on me, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to catch up with him, which is exciting. So anyway, I will.
Any day now, you'll be there.
Any day, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
if you need me to host the podcast for a little bit while you're at home taking care of things, I'll be here for you.
Well, we should connect our wives. That'd be fun. They can hang out.
Right.
Yeah, so we've got 3 kiddos, and our 4th is due any day now at the time of this recording, which is really, really exciting. So maybe I'll get a text, Like, hold on, babe, we got to finish the podcast.
It's a real deal, man. I was reffing. I used to officiate basketball, and when our 4th was on the way, I would leave my cell phone at the scorer's table during a basketball game and said, if my wife calls, let me know, because these guys are finishing on their own, and I'm going to be gone. So you might get that call today, and this podcast may never air.
Yeah, the difference between you and I is I'd be like, hold on, babe, I got to finish the podcast. We have this mutual understanding, right?
That's great.
Teasing. But anyway, man, welcome. So glad to have you. Why don't you unpack for our listeners? They probably have no idea who Mike Higgins is and what you do. So give us the lowdown, man. Where do you come from? Who are you? Married, kids? What do you like to do outside of...
I always thought that you would spend the last 2 or 3 weeks telling everybody that I was going to be on the podcast so they know exactly who I am. So now they don't know who I am.
No one knows who you are.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
that's a good idea, though. I should probably figure out a marketing strategy to be like, hey, get excited for Mike Higgins.
Right. No, you would have, listenership would have dropped off, so it's probably a good idea you didn't do that. But, yeah, man, thanks for having me. First and foremost, like we just talked about, a husband and a father. My wife, April, is awesome. Truly my best friend.
How'd you guys meet?
So, I used to race stock cars back in the day.
Okay.
That was super cool, and raced on a small track up in the UP, and then I raced down here in Kaukauna at WIR.
Nice.
Then she saw my race car and couldn't resist.
Yeah.
So
most can.
Right. So her sister was dating one of my best friends, and I just kind of made them make that introduction for me, and the rest is history. So took her on a first date. My mom was with us.
In the race car?
No, not in the race car.
Okay.
But my mom was at our first date when we went out to dinner. That was a little awkward, but
how old are you guys?
She stayed with me. How old were we?
Yeah.
I was 20.
Okay.
21.
Okay.
So right in that prime age of not knowing what to do,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so my wife April is super awesome. She takes care. She stays home, and we have 4 kids.
4 kids, boys,
so
girls.
3 boys and a girl.
Awesome. What
12,
are the ages?
12, 6, 4, and 1.
Very cool.
And we're a homeschooling family also, so we're a little bit goofy and weird.
Hey, we want to homeschool.
Yeah, it's
great.
It's pretty awesome. Our wife probably should connect, actually.
Yeah, that'd be cool. What do you guys have like a particular curriculum that you use, or?
Yeah, so that was a big, we use, the cool thing about homeschooling is we use a different, it's not one curriculum for like everybody. Like my oldest is in a different world right now, right, where he's doing math on the computer and all this, and my 6-year-old's just kind of learning 1 + 1 is 2.
Yeah.
So we really like it. It works well for our family, and ultimately it's kind of what the life that we want to design. We feel like homeschooling gives us a great opportunity to do that, right? Like I always use the example of, let's, instead of reading about the Boston Tea Party, let's drive to Boston and throw tea in the harbor ourselves and learn about it right there.
Right.
And so that's one of our dreams as far as like why homeschooling.
I love it. I think we get a lot of folks that are entrepreneurially minded. Maybe they are entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, leaders, public figures, right? We get them as guests. We get folks that are aspiring to that on the listenership side of things, which is exciting. And I think like I grew up, went to public schools.
Yep. Same here.
And I thought, homeschoolers were kind of the weird, crusty kids. And,
dude, they're so weird because my neighbor growing up was a homeschooler, and they were the weirdest people ever.
You get the jean skirt and clogs.
Yeah,
it's like,
that's who they were,
my
man.
kids still wear jean skirts and clogs, But I think it's actually really interesting. I think homeschooling is such a great option because you get to, like you said, lifestyle design.
Yep.
And there are things that in any kind of school system, public or private, there's gonna be so much time throughout the day that's wasted. Just like on 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, you add it up, and it's like several hours in a day to where you can have a really powerful, productive homeschooling program and be done by noon.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, hey, I want, maybe my oldest is a boy, Ezra, he's 3, and we talked about him. He already knows about the podcast. His favorite word is cash flow. He's excited about those things, and he wants to be able to come to work with Dad. And that's so that when we talk about lifestyle design, I want our kids growing up learning how to work from Dad and to be shaped to see that there are options in life. And you can be the employee or you can be the employer. You can build something. You can learn how to work with people. Like you had mentioned, travel and really bring to life the things that they're learning.
Yeah.
Sometimes people maybe don't think about those dimensions of homeschooling because it's work, right?
Yep.
A lot of the work falls on the wife if she's home, etc. And on the dad, like you're not
Let's be honest, mostly on my wife.
But mostly on the wife, right? Because they're home and we're out conquering whatever we're doing. But I think it's awesome. So if you're listening to this, and you've got kiddos still, consider looking into how flexible homeschooling can be, and even if you have a business, how it'd be really cool to maybe have your kids start pushing a broom in your business, right? Have them start being around a little bit. If you're in sales, maybe have them do ride along with you and come out and start learning how to talk with people and look at people and address people.
It's amazing. Like homeschool, it's becoming more and more popular as we've been in it just for 5 years now, and there's so many different variations of what homeschool can look like for different. Homeschool looks different for every single family.
Yeah.
There's also public school at home, and some people consider that homeschool. You know what I mean? So it can look totally different, and some of those, what you're just talking about, just those lessons, and a fun example is, I remember the first day my wife was homeschooling, and I got a text message a little after 11:30 in the afternoon, in the morning, I guess technically, and she said, "We're done for the day." And I was skeptical about homeschooling to begin with. And then I got that text message, and I'm like, there is no way you're done. How are you done? Because our son went to kindergarten in public school. And I'm like, he goes to school from 8 to 3. How are you done at 11:30? But we talk about 2 recesses, a lunch, reading time, nap time, art time, all this other...
Downtime in between classes, right.
So, there's literally, in those early years, there probably is only about 2 to 3 hours of actual schoolwork that gets done because their little attention span isn't even that, it's not that strong. So it's, I'm with you 100%.
And this isn't a knock on the public or private school systems.
No, not at all.
But especially when they're younger, it's part school, part daycare, right? I mean, it's part with all the time that goes into, you realize that they're not actually doing something here. Then what's the value of the function? Well, it's someone's watching our kid. Right?
Yep.
And so but then you're also well, actually, if it's an actual daycare, then you're paying for the service. If it's public school, then it's coming out through your property taxes. If it's private school, then you're paying on top.
You're paying in there.
So it seems like it's a really powerful thing, especially because you get to have that hand in shaping your child's education, which is really, really cool. And some people will be like, "Oh, Mike, I could never do that. Like, where would I even start?" Are you guys plugged into like a homeschooling co-op? You had mentioned that like stuff is increasing, and the cool thing about that is that communities are popping up where hey, other families are into this, and they're able to play off each other and help each other out and encourage each other on. Are you guys plugged into something like that?
Yeah, I'll give a plug right now to GBOC is the organization,
yeah.
So Green Bay Area Christian Homeschoolers. And my wife's been on the board for a while, and we're plugged into that organization. Cool. And it's just been great for that exact, like we've met other people, and there's a lot of homeschoolers that aren't weird, so don't be scared, you know what I mean?
But they don't all wear jean skirts.
Right, not every single one of them, but there's a couple that do. There's a couple that do, but they're great people too.
Yeah.
And then we have a local Northeast Wisconsin Christian Athletic Homeschool association. We got NUCHA, so I'm a coach with NUCHA. I've been part of NUCHA for a while.
Basketball?
And coach middle school basketball. So that's another great opportunity to plug in. And fun. My oldest is 12, and I remember when he was like 5, and we were starting. Because at 5, right, that's when you start playing sports in today's world. I grew up, kind of going back to my story, I grew up as a 4-sport athlete in high school, and I went to play college basketball for a couple of years, and then decided it wasn't the route for me, and or maybe the basketball team decided it wasn't the route for me because I was on the bench a lot, so I was like, this isn't that great. But, that's the route that as a father, especially with your firstborn, like that's what I saw him doing because that's what I did, right? I wanted to kind of live that out through him. He's not an athlete. He's not. He loves athletics. He just doesn't have the desire. He wants to play to have fun. He doesn't want to play to compete. And it took me a long time to realize that. But what homeschooling has allowed us to do and where we're at now is he's my entrepreneur. He's and it's funny to see, I haven't really noticed it until this last year and a half. We had a couple snowstorms when we were recording this probably 2 months ago, and we had 3 in a row where it was every morning we had snow. He was up before 7 o'clock, and I had to hold him in the house because he was knocking on our neighbors' doors to shovel their driveways, and he was getting $10 per driveway. He made $57 because one lady only had $7 in cash.
And you're like, can I borrow $5?
But, right. But I'm like, dude, he's not my athlete. But look at this kid's drive and desire. He's awesome. He is just hungry and
sees an opportunity.
Yeah.
To be able to serve people. Knows he can monetize that. Goes out and does it. Awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, that's so cool. Love it, man. But if he was tied up in a school, then he couldn't do that.
Yep.
Right. It's really, really cool. I mean, just so many opportunities. So something to consider. Consider the flexibility of it. There's the responsibility. There's the work involved. Right. It's not like it's just easy, but it's actually a lot more doable than what people might think.
It is.
The resources are out there with the technology and the internet. I mean, the courses, the access to information. There's even some stuff where it's you can do online classes where there's folks online that are teaching, and maybe the parents are more just kind of managing that, especially the older that they get.
Yeah.
Which is super exciting. I think there's opportunity for kids to graduate high school earlier, and even start to go on to doing higher ed courses while they're yet in high school, kind of similar to doing college credit in high school.
Yeah, like an AP class.
But you could even start sooner. Because again, you have these options, and if your kid is really catching on, really brilliant in some areas, they can go a lot farther. They're really kind of unrestrained on how far they want to pursue that thing.
Yeah.
Because you have the flexibility.
Or give them the opportunity to double down and really hone in on that one thing that they love to do.
Yeah.
Because that's where their gifts are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a cool guy. I have no idea what his name is, but he's a blacksmith. Right in the 21st century, he's a blacksmith. He's from the UK. But he lives in the mountains of Montana now. You could probably YouTube him. He's got 5 million subscribers.
Really?
And he makes amazing stuff. He dropped out of high school at 16 years old. He said, look, I've learned what I need to learn from an educational perspective, from just general studies.
Right.
I already know what I want to do. I have a business. I have a model. I just want to go pursue this one time. Yeah, he does. And not only does he have an incredible online presence, but he makes phenomenal, metallurgical items, and he's got a business doing it, right? And it's like, I don't know if he was homeschooled or if he went to a school system, but what I love about that is to where, like, you don't necessarily have to follow that traditional path, high school, college, job, and sometimes with homeschooling you can really get the flexibility and creativity as you kind of get to know each and one of your kids, how to help unleash them and guide them, through what they're good at, what they enjoy doing, and then finding a way to be able to monetize that, If that's working for someone else, awesome. If that's building your own business, awesome. It seems like there might be more flexibility and creativity there, which is cool. So.
Yeah, and as a dad, each child, even at the young age of 2 and 3 years old, you can tell they're wildly different.
Yeah.
Wildly different. And you gotta lean into that a little bit, So.
Yeah, our youngest is, so we got boy, girl, boy right now. And I could see our oldest being an entrepreneur, for sure.
Do you know what the fourth is going to be, or are you surprised? Girl?
Yeah. And so, but our youngest, he's like violent, man. Like, he's going to be like the defensive end that's going to rip you apart.
Yeah.
He gets in the mix with the kiddos and just, and probably because he has to survive, right? But he throws himself on him and punches him in the face. Like, that's, he's won, right? But he's got that drive in him, really, really cool. It's just awesome to see. So we could talk about that for hours.
Hey, this is Kyle. Well done on your decision today to be great. Those are my kiddos in the background. Hey, if you want more of this kind of content, find me on social media. We'll keep the conversation going. You can hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, at StartWithWNTD. Again, at StartWithWNTD. We'll see you there.
That's so cool. So, and you also touch on it too, like within homeschooling, there's sports options. There's other options. Like, it's not like you're isolated. Your kids are going to be weirdos growing up. There's incredible communities, in person, online, that have been built out, resources to where you can really give a robust education, which can be great.
Yeah, not to mention, we live in a great school district, in the North Swamico School District right now, and we're taxpayers in that school district.
Right.
And if we so chose, our children can actually play extracurricular sports in that school district, which a lot of people don't know. So if you want to be, another level of taking it to that, high-level sports, you can tap into the resources that are already there.
Right, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Super cool.
All right, man, so that's awesome. Very cool, kind of behind the curtains peek into Mike Higgins' life.
Yeah.
Which is
great. I know this is going to be a homeschooling podcast. My apologies.
Yeah, right. No, yeah, and that's kind of the fun thing about the podcast is depending on who I sit down with, the conversation goes in different directions, which is sweet.
And one thing that I really think that you've had a lot of amazing guests. I've been listening, I've been consuming the podcast since I met you, and in preparation for this podcast, right? And a lot of leaders, a lot of thought leaders, a lot of business leaders. But at the end of the day, our number one leadership job is our house, right? So I think that even as jokingly talking about homeschool, our family is the number one place we need to lead. And I think a lot of it translates. We read books on how to become better businessmen. We read books on how to grow our companies. We read books on how to, reduce turnover in our company. But a lot of those principles we can take home and use the same thing in our own four walls, right? And that's where it's most important. I don't care if I'm the number one realtor. I don't care if I'm the number one real estate investor. I don't care if I'm the number one anything outside of my house. I want to be number one where it counts.
Yep.
And I think that that's super important.
Yeah, and I'd even push it further and say family is actually number two. I would say the number one is self, right?
I agree with you.
Because I agree with you. Sometimes we think hey, it's business, family, then self, right? But the reality is if we can't lead ourselves, we can't lead our families. Right. And if we can't lead a family of 3, 4, 5 people, how can we lead a team of 100?
Yeah.
Right? And it's so working out saying look, self-government is really the common denominator of all government. Self-leadership is the common denominator of all leadership. And so really, if we're reading a business book on leadership principles, apply them to ourselves, they naturally flow within our family, right? Because the family is an organization just like a business is. Yeah. And then, in the business. So going about it moving off in those concentric circles, totally agree with you though. In no way should we divorce or see business and family and self as 3 different spheres. it's actually concentric circles. So
Yep.
one is inside the other, which is inside the other. And starting with self then helps us to be consistent and a really powerful leader and have good results in all of them.
And it's not selfish to take
Not
care
at
of
all.
yourself, because I mean
No,
that's
not
been
at
a journey kind of through my story in the last 6 to 9 months of really diving into myself mentally, spiritually, physically, and I'll tell you what, focusing on that has made all the difference in my outward, my business, my family life, my personal relationship with my wife, and everything. So I agree with you, probably 3,000,000%.
Yeah. And I couldn't emphasize that point that you just made more. It's somewhere along the way. I don't know, and I don't know where we've got it. It's kind of been like, well, if we do anything to focus on ourselves, then we're necessarily, not serving our families well, or we're not serving our businesses well, or our teams well. It's kind of like, maybe there's a ditch there. Like if we only focus on ourselves and ignored everyone else. But the other ditch is to focus on everyone else and ignore ourselves. Like one thing we talk about in our house, if we don't have bread for ourselves, how would we have bread to give, right? And it goes back to the principle: if I can't lead myself, if I can't provide for myself, if I can't discipline myself, like what do I really have to offer other people, right? And so it's kind of like, yes, you have to start with yourself. Body, mind, and spirit, right? Make sure those things are taken care of, cultivated, etc. So that out of the overflow of that, you have to give, right? And you can give in greater portions in that regard. And like you said, you see the output increase, and what you ultimately can give to those entities increase. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I don't think that can be overstated enough.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool, man. So tell us a bit about what it is that you do. We know you're a realtor. We know you're doing that with Keller Williams.
Yeah.
But kind of take us on timeline. Like, have you been doing that since you migrated south, from Niagara? Or,
so one thing I will. So not updated on my LinkedIn, as I just realized as you're saying. I'm with a realtor with Kos Realty Group, Kos Realty Group.
Oh, got it.
So I was with Keller Williams for 3 years. I like to classify myself maybe more in the real estate professional world, right? Like cool. So, and why I say that is because, looking back to 2015 when I got my real estate license, one of the things that I knew right away is I was going to be an investor in real estate. I know I've had a couple of real estate investors on the podcast. Corey is a guy that I know.
Yeah.
And,
Grant
Cardone. He's been on the podcast, right?
He's gonna be. He's listening right now.
He's listening. I
so
know.
Uncle
I
G,
sent it to him. I texted it to him. But I knew that was going to be a world that I lived in because I just believed that real estate was going to be an opportunity to create wealth in my family and change the family tree that not a lot of other opportunity out there would do. And that's changed over the years because with the advancement of technology, like you could argue that I could start a fintech company like we were talking about before and sell that off and wildly change my family dynamic and my family tree. I just don't understand that world, right? I grew up, my dad's a builder. I grew up literally picking up shingles off the ground when he would do roofs, siding, windows jobs. So I understood houses and I understood that you could take something that was old and dingy and fix it up and you could make a profit, or you could keep it and rent it out, So I knew, kind of taking it back, that was going to be a big part of my life. So I thought naturally get your real estate license would be a good entry level into the industry because in my mind, who knows the market better than realtors who are selling houses every day, right? Oddly enough, there's not enough realtors that invest in real estate, which is really weird because, they'll find a really great deal on a house and take it to an investor. And sometimes I'm like, why aren't you buying that yourself? Like, you could change your family tree you buy 10 of these things, So that's kind of why, now I'm into a little bit of commercial real estate as a retail side of things. So we have a retail brokerage at Kos Realty and then real estate investment company that we do fix and flips and buy and holds. And that's kind of where we're at today.
Are you doing anything personally, building a portfolio personally?
Yeah, so I have 4 rental properties myself, and I just got done flipping 2 houses, done a little wholesaling, done a little wholetailing, so I do it all. I just think that real estate's going to be in my world probably forever. Yeah. My goal is to kind of with going into the why part of real estate also would be I want to have $1 million in real estate assets to give each of my children. So, you know,
$1 million in real estate assets.
Yeah, $1 million per portfolio for each of them. So
Okay.
$4 million total. That's why I had to stop having kids, because that number kept creeping up. You know.
Hey, so let's just stop there. I want you to repeat that again for our listeners. What do you actually want to leave your kids? Each kid?
Each kid, I want $1 million real estate portfolio of their own. The original goal is by 18. Now, I have 6 more years to get there with one, and then continuously grow that. But I look back and going to college, I wasn't given a college fund, college tuition, and nor do I think that I will hand over money just to go to college, because I don't know if that's going to be the right option for all my children. It might be the right option for 1, 2, all 4. But going back to the homeschooling conversation, they understand what I do on a day-to-day basis, and to be able to give them an asset like this, like real estate, that you can see how Dad has built and grown this asset to give to you. Now it's your choice. You can sell it all and cash out and have $1 million and, you know, go to Vegas and do whatever you want with it, or you can continue to leverage that and add to it and turn that $1 million into $10 million. And I'm going to be here to help you, whichever route you choose, right? But I just think that that's one of my goals, is just to give them that tangible asset so that they can start to build and, you know, kind of take what I've taught them intellectually and move forward with that.
Yeah. The ultimate, you know, aim of education is to actually go use it and use it for others. That's awesome. So I think that's a phenomenal goal. And I'm curious, like, how many of you folks are listening? Do you have that goal for your kids? Have you even thought about it? Right? Maybe you started at 529, you know, like a type of educational account for your kids, or you're trying to save for this or that or the other thing. I hope one thing that you take away from this is to think bigger. Right? Maybe the goals are too small. And what a gift! Like, think about how would your life have changed if at 18 years old, or at some point in your adulthood, you received $1 million portfolio, right? And so, to put that in the context, let's say 10 houses valued at $100,000 each,
right? Yep.
So it's and then it's cash flowing, etc. And your dad helped to build that, and he's going to be there to help you manage it. And by that point in life, he would have already taught you a lot, and so now it's time to really start to exercise that. And he's not just going to, you know, throw you to the wolves. He's already equipped you, and he's going to continue to help with that. But now, how would that change your life? Like, what options would you now have? Like, would you feel like you had to go to college to study X? Or do you think that you might have other options with what you want to consider, what you could build and give your time to? Maybe it'd be real estate. Maybe you see, like, hey, I can add to this portfolio. Or I could venture into more. I could take equity here and go invest in this thing and start a business, right? Without losing the asset. And how that can expand the horizons because your dad had a vision, right? I think that's so powerful, man. I love it.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to like what we were talking about before, is the legacy that you're going to leave, right? You can build that, and you're leaving a legacy regardless. Like, one will be left, like we talked about before. So which one do you want to leave?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that one, you know, ultimately it's tough to think about, but that's not going to impact my 12-year-old. That's going to impact my 12-year-old's 12-year-old's 12-year-old. You know what I mean? Down the line, generational, right? So that's, you know, my wife and I talk about just kind of that being kind of the chain breaker. We want to be the ones where, like, our family tree looks like this, and then all of a sudden when our branch comes out, it just wildly different, you know, and grows exponentially.
Dude, we're going to have to have you guys over for dinner because, like,
I'm in, man.
We think the same thing. Like, as far as what you've shared, like, we're very like-minded. We don't come from wealth. We don't come from generational wealth. I think our parents have done the best that they know how to, which is great. We're so thankful for it. Yeah, we are thinking not in terms of quarters or even our lifetime, but in generations, and how we can set, you know, our future generations up for success to go further faster than we could. I love it, and I think the world needs more of that, and that actually gets at the heart of this podcast. You have that same dynamic, not just between, you know, parents and their children, but what about you know, entrepreneurs and public figures in the next generation of entrepreneurs and leaders and public figures.
Yeah.
And I'm helping to broker that conversation here. Just like you'd be jealous to see your children succeed and you want to set them up for success, that's what this podcast does. To have folks, for instance, like yourself coming in here, a lot of you started left to right? But things that you can share and inspire other people towards so that they can move further faster. I mean, think about how powerful this is. Like, yes, you're on kids, but what if there's like a 19-year-old, 20-year-old that's listening to this right now?
Right.
Or a 60-year-old, or a 55-year-old, or a 40-year-old who's like, I've got kids. What an awesome idea. How do I get started?
Yeah.
And they're going to reach out to you and you're going to help them, right? Or even just casting the vision sets them on this trajectory, changes the course of life forever. It's just amazing, right?
Right. I remember Matt from Cornerstone was on a podcast.
Yeah.
He talked about like, you know, looking at the Bible of how, you know, when Noah built the ark, he wasn't 22 years old.
Right.
You know what I mean? These guys are in their 90s or 400. You know what I mean? So like, you talk about the 19 or 20-year-old, but there's also that 68-year-old that has the opportunity. It's the Colonel Sanders, you know, conversation of he didn't start KFC until he was almost 70 years old, right? And look at the legacy and impact he's left now.
Yeah.
Some of the best chicken in the world, you know. So
You're still fogging a mirror, it ain't over, baby.
right,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, I love it, man. So let's so with that, let's double click a little bit on the why, right? And it came out. We talked a little bit before too, but you mentioned a few minutes ago on this idea of building your legacy. My guess is that might have something to do with your why in life. But why do you do what you do, man? With the Kos Realty Group, you said commercial and retail real estate. As well as helping on the investment side of things, as well as building your own portfolio. Why? Why do you keep on getting up and giving yourself to this work?
Yeah, man.
Again, I think you already alluded to it, but double click on that.
Yeah, I did, and I think it goes a little bit deeper. You had said something earlier about, you know, our parents did a great job with us. We didn't, you know, neither one of us clearly came from wealth, but they did the best they can with the knowledge that they had.
Yeah.
And so far, I think we've turned out okay, right? You know, you're a pretty normal dude, got a great beard.
We're both really good-looking guys, by the way.
Right, I just don't have the beard. But we have more knowledge now than we had before. And I'm an only child. I have a small family on my side. And I don't know if I would say a pressure, but I've always had this desire to take care of my family. And like I just talked about, my kids, and my wife, obviously. But I also look at my parents and the fact that they grew up in a culture where my dad's very blue collar. They don't have a lot. And when they retire, quote unquote, air quotes, retire, they don't have a big 401k, right? My grandparents, same thing. You know, my grandpa worked very hard and put a lot of money in the stock market. And in 2008 and 2009, I saw literally half of that money go away. And as the time of this recording right now, the stock market had its worst day ever yesterday, right? And that's happening again. And I kind of feel this like burden, I shouldn't say a burden, responsibility to be that person to take care of them, right, wrong, or indifferent. Like, I feel like I have the knowledge and I have the abilities and the network in place to be able to do that. As I have to grow my own, right? I have to get my own bread, but I need to build that up so that I can feed them too. So I think that's like the deep why, because at the end of the day, like I feel like I'm not going to rely on the government to take care of them, because that's not going to turn out great. And I don't know, I'm the only child. Like, who else is going to do it? So, it all comes back to family. It all comes back to family. And, basically just, I feel like I'm the one. I'm the guy that was chosen to do that. So that's what I want to do.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, and only if you think the show deserves it, would you go over to Apple Podcasts and give us an honest, thoughtful 5-star review? This will really help us in our mission to equip the world for success.
Okay. Let's do this. Let's get into a few failures here.
Oh, man.
So let's do this. So let's take, you might have thought about 3 failures. And I'd love to take each one. Let's think about what you did right, what you did wrong, like where you went wrong in that, and then how you might do that differently. So for our listeners, experimenting with a little bit different approach in this section, which is fun. So Mike's my guinea pig, and it's gonna be great.
Perfect.
But cool, man. So what's the first story? What do you got for us?
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully I can come up with a few. I got one good one to start, though. I take it back to 2017, was when I was at Keller Williams, had the opportunity to run a large real estate team. So before that, I was just a single realtor and doing realtor-y things. But I've always had this like leadership, personal development drive in me, right, where I wanted to lead people, manage people, whatever. So I had that opportunity, and one of the biggest teams in our area here. We sold over 300 houses back-to-back years. It was awesome. And financially, right, like at that point in my life, it was all about the money. And I had one of my biggest financial years ever. And so kind of going the right, wrong, different. Wrong, right, was my focus was financial. That's it. So my health suffered, my relationship suffered, my personal development suffered, and my money grew. Right? We talk about people over profits. Like I had the profits, I had the money, but I didn't really have anything then. I just had money. In that, I think what I did right is I tracked my money. So I had a spreadsheet made out. One of my mentors of mine, he told what you measure gets managed, and I measured my income, and I measured the deals that were coming in, and I measured the deals of the team, and I was I had that locked in, and that was a good takeaway that I had, was that you do have to have key indicators, right, and visit that daily, because if you don't visit your goals daily, if you don't visit that daily, you're going to forget about it, out of sight, out of mind. So I did that really well, and I think that was a big part in what helped in some of that success. But what I would kind of working on a balance, I think, would have been something to focus on differently and have a better work-life integration, so to speak, right? Because I don't believe anything's ever in perfect balance. You're going to be in different seasons of life. You're going to be in a season of life where you got to work really, really, really hard, and sometimes you're going to have to put in 12-hour days, and then sometimes you're going to be in a season of life where you're really focusing on your family or your marriage relationship. And the insights and the perspective that I have now, looking back, I would have had that different approach. I'm part of a mastermind, a dad mastermind called Front Row Dads, and it's the motto of Front Row Dads is to be a family man with a business, not a businessman with a family. And back in this story I'm telling you about, it was very businessman, family second. And I kind of shifted that to now be a family man with a business first. And again, like I said, I don't care. Number one's not the goal. As a realtor, as a real estate investor, it's not the goal for me to be number one. My goal is to be number one with my family. And if that means I can build a $3 million real estate company, awesome. But if it means I can build a $137,000 real estate company and I'm the happiest man and I am a rock star in my house, that's even better. So that would be, I don't know if you want to dive into that a little bit more, some things you wrote down, but
yeah. So let me just recap it quick here. So what you're saying, going into real estate, going all in, one of the things you did right was not only that you went all in and had a successful year, but you also tracked your money during that year, right? In a sense, you were money-minded, and that was crucial to your success, which is really, really important. You didn't ignore it. Like you had mentioned, what doesn't get measured, doesn't get managed, right? Yep. And that was something that you did right. But it also came to a point where there's an overemphasis there. Being money-minded is really, really important and really, really good. And my guess is maybe a lot of people or most people aren't money-minded enough. But then there's that ditch that you can fall into of being money first, people second, and that's where you went wrong, where you swung to having the money first, and it caused you to suffer the diminishing returns on your health, on your family, on your relationships, all that kind of stuff. And guess while you had the money, you didn't have a lot to show for it, right? And it kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier about keeping the people first and the money second.
Yep.
To where having the money second doesn't mean it's not important. It doesn't mean you ignore it. No, it's extremely important. You need to be money-minded in that regard, but it's not the ultimate thing. It's the people first, right? And that's where you ultimately said, hey, going back, if I could do it differently, I would have had given careful thought to just the integration of work and life. We agree with you, like the work-life balance thing. I think that's a myth. I don't think you can just have these separate buckets and think that they exist like that. I think, especially as an entrepreneur, or realtor, investor, like all of life is work, and it's fun. It's wonderful how you approach it. But making sure that you have the people first and the money second. And I think another thing you did actually right in that situation too is you had that mentor. You had that mentor that taught you the importance of being money-minded, right? But then you also learned through the failure of, hey, as important as money is, it's second to people, right? And people includes yourself, right? People includes, talking about before, leading yourself, caring for yourself. Otherwise, you're going to burn out.
And it's true, like what that year of quote-unquote success, right? If you looked at paper, that was a successful year.
Come on, cash money.
But that actually led to a year and a half of some of the darkest places that you can be, like a real burnout for myself. And I told you earlier, kind of the last, focusing on self in the last 6-9 months, that's after that year and a half of being as low as you can be, because you really burn out and you forget about yourself, and you forget about the people around you. And I thought I arrived. You never make that much money before. I'm just a young blue collar guy from the UP, and all of a sudden you make this kind of money, more money than anybody in my family's ever made a year, and you're like, oh, wow, I'm pretty good.
The world is mine,
right? But then at the cost, it's the cost to get the opportunity cost to get that, like at my health and just my mental stability, and then that money becomes the driver. And money's not good nor bad; it's a tool, right? I've heard you say it before too. Like, part of our obligation, our duty to ourselves, is to be successful, right? Like, if God gave us those gifts, we should continuously try to strive for that, but not at all costs. So,
if you think about it, if you strive, at all costs, well, all costs would mean you're dead. Which, guess what? You're not striving anymore. Right, you're not caring for your family anymore.
Yeah.
If you work yourself into a hole 6 feet deep, and you're only 30 something, you left your family hanging, right? And the life insurance policy isn't the same as dad being around. And so there's a law of diminishing returns. There's a way in which, life is so much of a marathon, and there are times to sprint, but the marathon is not the sprint, right? And sometimes giving ourselves to years like that. Sometimes we can have a sprint year like that, where we leave it all on the table, in a real sense. But it was good and right and necessary. But everyone has to kind of discern that for themselves. And one of the key indicators, again, if you're doing it well and right, is what's first. Is this the people first and the money second, or is it the money first and the people second? And sometimes that can be such a subtle thing, a fine line. It's like, which one is which? Because they're both so important. I'm doing this for people, and I want to build wealth so I can help more people. And if I wasn't bringing real value to people, that was bringing in, income and cash flow, then I couldn't help people at all. So it's like, both are so important, but yet there is one that's more important. And it goes back to what you're saying. I'd rather build a business, maybe it's not $1 million business, even though that'd be great. But if I was making $100,000 a year, I loved what I did, was good at it, and was helping a lot of people, and knew I could set my future generations up for success, done, right?
Right. And you think about, like, in the midst of that time that I just talked about, obviously we're on a podcast right now. I consume a lot of podcasts. Every podcast that I listened to was real estate or real estate investing related. That was my focus. That was my one, which could be great. Like, I had a great focus, but I was obsessive, like, beyond. So now if you look at my podcast, I have a podcast on dad, like entrepreneurship in general. I have spiritual podcasts, homeschool podcasts, because my wife has them on there. But like I was just so focused on that, which caused that burnout. And then I got away from my kind of personal growth development, which, Jim Rohn has a great quote. You can't out-earn your personal growth. If you're not earning enough, you're not growing enough, right? So in that time, I stopped growing myself, whether that's, personal development, spiritually, all of the above. And you hit that ceiling, and you're like, why can't I get any higher? Why am I going down in the next year? Why am I making less money? Because I stopped trying to grow, because I thought I grew enough. I grew enough to get to that point, and I was here, man. I made it. I made the 150 plus. It was awesome. Well, I stopped growing, and very quickly after I stopped reading personal development books, listening to the right podcast, being around the right people, the five people in my life, right? Like, I just started to diminish, and it's been a journey to now realize that and grow back up. But that's all part of our story, right? Like, the one thing that I love about listening to, I consume a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk, and I look at my life like I'm okay. Like it's the second quarter, and I'm down 27-23, but it's going to be halftime. I'm going to regroup, and I'm going to win the second half 47-41, and I'm going to win the whole thing. You know what I mean? So you're in this chapter of your life right now, and having that perspective of realizing, like, it's not over, man. I'm 32 years old. Like, I am in the second quarter, like the proverbial second quarter of my life, the actual second quarter of my life. And yeah, I got kicked in the teeth. You know what I mean? But I'm going to put my mouth guard back in, and I'm going to get up, and I'm going to take on the second half and just dominate. And I'm going to do it with the lessons that I learned in the first half, So
I'm writing down, as you were talking and kind of further unpacking, a second story, a sub-story came out.
It did?
Yeah, it did. And so let me tell you what I hear, and you can let me know if that was if I'm even listening. So like, in that time in your life where you were really going after it hard, right? Right, wrong, and different. What you did right was you went all in on learning, and you were just drinking from the fire hydrant, which is really, really important. I think sometimes people give up on themselves, or they think education was something that they did at a point in time, and not as education being something that's ongoing. So that really the point of school and education is to equip you to learn the rest of your life, right? And so I think one thing that you really, really did right there was that continual learning and seeking out and understanding, right? And that deep dive for you into real estate, etc. But where you went wrong, the failure here maybe was that you ignored the whole man, right? While you were focusing on learning in the professional realm of things and in your niche, like you had mentioned, you weren't learning about what it meant to be a father, right? Or you weren't part of that mastermind group, or you weren't, there's other aspects of your life that, because you were so focused on making money and so focused on the real estate side of things, that you weren't keeping pace and cultivating the rest of who Mike is and the other spheres in his life. In a sense to where maybe the don't do is don't ignore the whole man, right? Who are you? I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a professional businessman, I'm a real estate broker, whatever it might be, right? And then find ways to cultivate and grow and all that. And if you could do that differently, it's what you're doing today. You learn from your failure, which is awesome. I'd say like, hey, yes, real estate, I need to keep on learning that. But what does it look like to get around other dads that are, family men with a business, right?
Yeah.
And learn from them and make sure that I'm not ignoring that part of who Mike is, right? And it's easy to do because like when we put on our one thing, right, we want to go on that. That's really, really good. But that concept, that idea, isn't meant to ignore or reduce the other parts of who we are. It's meant to help us focus, right? But it's not meant to, like when Gary Keller talks about the one thing, which is a fantastic book.
Yeah, great book.
It's not meant to say like, hey, just focus on your business and not your marriage. Just focus on your business and not your family.
Yeah.
Just focus on your business and not yourself. No, like all these things are happening simultaneously. So the whole point is to focus and to treat the whole man. So anyway, that's what I heard coming out of that. Like double click on that, man.
And within that book, just using the one thing as an example, it's funny that you even bring that up. We didn't talk about it, but that's being part of the Keller Williams world for a long time, like that's a book that's had a big impact on a lot of people within the Keller Williams organization. It's one of the number one business books across the world. But you're right, it's not just, it is the one thing, right? What's the one thing such that by doing makes everything else easier or unnecessary? But if you look in the book, there's an exercise called the 7 circles exercise. And what the 7 circles is it's finding your one thing in all the areas that make up you as the man, the woman, whoever's listening to this podcast. It's what's the one thing that you need to do spiritually to make your spiritual life great? What's the one thing you need to do personally? Health, relationships, business, finances, all around.
Yeah.
So you can actually, according to the 7 circles exercise, you can have 7 one things, but those collectively make up the one thing, the one person, the one Kyle, the one Mike, the one whoever, which kind of contributes to the person as a whole. So right. I think good job listening. Good job. That's what you do. That's great work.
Well, so it's in a way to think about that too, with the 7 circles exercise. Macro and micro, right? So your macro one thing might be your why in life, right? So mine is to use my presence and my pros to inspire you to go all in on you, so that you live a legacy worth leaving, right? Now, if I zoom in, there are different aspects of my life in which I carry out that purpose, that why, right? It's with my family, my wife, my kids, right?
Yep.
And what I'm doing with the podcast, and in my role in sales or whatever I might be in. And that's exactly what you're saying, is that 7 circles exercise helps you to take out that macro purpose, that macro one thing, and now say, hey, look, when we zoom in, there's more than one tree in the forest, and those are important trees, right? And we want to make sure that those are healthy, strong trees that bear fruit. And so the one thing concept and idea, if you've heard that floating around, the temptation is to think that it's only this one thing and everything else gets ignored. That was not my takeaway from the book, and it seems like you're
clearly
saying,
not mine either.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. or
right, or we read a different book, like a bootleg copy.
That'd be funny. Yeah, actually, that'd be kind of a provocative way to say it. Is don't focus on one thing. Well,
it's all about the clickbait, man. Put it out there.
Yeah, clickbait. Come on.
All right, I want to know who's next. Who do you want to hear on what not to do? Which entrepreneur, which leader, which public figure in your network do you want to hear on the show? Maybe it's you. Maybe you need to be here. So let's connect me with whomever, and we'll sit down for coffee, a beer, or even a cigar, and together equip the world for success.
Well, cool. Did you have another failure in mind that you want to unpack for us, another story to share with us on what you did right, wrong, and different, what not to do?
Nothing. Honestly, not a lot that comes to mind. There's a lot. I do like this new format. However, I kind of like the idea of the story because I'm just thinking selfishly of the way when I consume your content now moving forward, I learn in the way of a story. I think a lot of people learn by a story, and hopefully that story can, reach people at the right time in their life, and they can learn from it too. So I'm looking forward to kind of this format moving forward. A couple of things that I had written down prior to coming on the podcast from, just consuming it. There's a lot of different, failures. And I think one of the main themes that I'm seeing right now kind of show up is, we've touched on it multiple times, is just self-awareness and understanding. I've consumed a lot of Gary Vee. It sounds like you consume a lot of Gary Vee also.
Actually, I haven't. I'm familiar.
You're familiar with his concepts, clearly.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about it. I think the misconception is that he's all about the hustle, the grind, and that's the messaging he talks about, which he does talk about that. But if you listen to his keynotes and his messaging, he talks about self-awareness a lot. And I think it's key for entrepreneurs that are listening to this to have that self-awareness. Again, you alluded to it earlier, is focusing on self, because you need to make you happy before you can make anybody else happy. Michael J. Mayer, the author of the book, 7 Levels of Communication. Great book, written in kind of a real estate story, but it's a great entrepreneurial book. Talks about going from relationships to referral. I consume his podcast also, and he has the acronym FLY. And what FLY stands for is first, love yourself. If you can't fly, you can't help anybody else fly, right? So I think that kind of from a failure standpoint is being tuned into what everybody else thinks of me early on in life, right? And not being fine-tuned. I mean, it took me 32 years to start thinking what makes Mike Mike, and not doing something because Kyle likes when Mike does that. You know what I mean? I think that's something that I hope that everybody can take away, is just don't use my failures of podcast guests that have been on here before, your failures that you openly share about all the time, and use those to not, let's springboard yourself into quote-unquote success. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a good, man. I love that. I love that acronym. In our day and age, it kind of sometimes like you tell someone to focus on themselves, or first love yourself, and sometimes there seems like there's like a lot of kickback of like, well, we already do that enough. Like, we're humans, we're necessarily self-interested, which I think is true. We all get up, we all sleep, we all feed ourselves, we all brush our teeth. Like we're looking out for ourselves, which is really, really good. But there's been like, I don't know, like if it's more of like I don't know if like it's a modern thing, like where it's like if you start to talk about being self-interested, people might equate that with being selfish, and I think, and again, it goes back to like, if you are a tree and you stop bearing fruit, what are you actually giving to the world, right? If you aren't cultivating your own ability to produce and to give fruit that's going to be of enjoyment and benefit to others, then what are you doing, right? You're wasting your potential and your capacity to be a blessing to the world around you. And I think that's the ultimate form of selfishness, when we actually so ignore ourselves under the guise or the excuse of like, hey, we're trying to help others.
Yeah.
But then we run out really quickly of actually having anything to give. That's one of the most selfish things we can do. But it seems interesting because it's almost like inverted to where like some people might hear this and be like, well, I don't want to focus on myself because that feels really selfish. And there is definitely a selfish ditch in which you can fall into for sure. But that's not what you're saying. You're saying, hey, we need to be self-aware. We need to know the things that we're good at, the things that we enjoy, so we can be of better use to the world. And in doing that and having that kind of self-focus and cultivation and developing, further developing our gifts and skills and knowledge so we can better use them in service for others, is going to be one of the best things that we can not only do for ourselves, but the world around us.
Yep.
Am I tracking with you?
Yeah, 100%. Like I talked about it before, and we talked about our parents before. They did the best they could with the information that they had.
Yep.
We have a lot more information available to us, and what makes we all have access to the same information. You and I can both go on Google right now, and we can look something up, and we can get the quote-unquote answer, right? The difference in that is our interpretation of that answer, or how we, based on our past life experiences, how we see that answer. And that's kind of what you're saying, like, our gifts to share with the world come through that lens of how we've interpreted it and how we've lived our life, right? And that's what makes this podcast so great, right? Because there's 100 business entrepreneurial podcasts out there, right? But there's not another Kyle out there. So darn right there isn't.
And thank God.
But like your lens of how you've seen things and how you interpret things and the way that you interact with people and how you're, the network and the relationships that you've built, nobody else has that. That's yours. I can't Google that and look that up. And it's your duty to take all that and do exactly what you're doing and share with the world.
I love it, man. So it seems like, sorry, are you saying just in your own experience that that there's a point?
I'm all over the place, so I'm not sure what I'm saying.
Well, are you saying like there's a point or period in your life where like maybe you weren't self-aware? Are you going back to kind of that first story that you shared as far as like that year stretch where you focus and did so much? Or I think you made the comment earlier about it took you until 32 years or whatever to kind of realize some of this stuff. Like, is there? It seems like there might be another story lurking.
Yeah, you're doing a great job of listening. Yeah, I am 32, and I would say it took the first 31 years of my life to realize that I need that self-awareness journey, right? It's been in this last year, like I alluded to it earlier, that the first 31 years is, I don't know if it's a product of being an only child and not, I don't know what it's just, the way that I kind of grew up and how I was is it was always about pleasing others, because if I made other people happy, I felt happy making focus, I wanted Susie or Timmy or whoever to like me. Maybe it wasn't necessarily because it was for me. It was because I could make this funny joke, and every time I made people laugh, I thought that they liked me more. But realizing that didn't really fulfill me, and it wasn't who I was necessarily, right? Like, just really trying to figure out that self-awareness and who I am now at this point in my life. It's taken 30 plus years to do that. But again, you go back and you talk about, like, that's just part of the story. That's part of the journey. That's the first quarter. Growing up, I was a 4-sport athlete, so everything kind of, I think, in terms of sports, I think there's a lot of parallels between.
Which 4 sports?
So it was football, basketball, and then track and golf in the spring season. So,
nice. Beast.
Yeah, so I graduated with 40 kids. We could do whatever we wanted in school, basically. You know what I mean?
You were the golf team.
Right. Me and one other guy were the golf team. But, there's a lot of parallels between sports and business and just life in general, right? So I think that kind of using that analogy is that was the first quarter, that was the second quarter. It's not about how you start, it's how you finish. And right now, it's halftime. I'm putting the game plan together because I'm going after the second half, and we're going to execute that, and we're going to win the trophy. That's, not everybody gets the trophy.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that in a society today that everybody thinks that you should get a 17th place ribbon. There's one winner, and I'm in the process of meeting with my coaches, aka my wife. We're putting together the game plan, and we're going to dominate the second half.
Come on, love it. How many folks listening here are having that conversation with their wife, right? How are we going to dominate the second half? Like, it's not over, baby. Like, we're just getting started. And that's the other thing too. It's like hard pressure. It doesn't matter. Like, maybe you're 40 years old. Maybe you feel like you've blown the first 40 years. Look, statistically, you have another lifetime.
Yep.
You got another 40, right? 40 down, 40 more to go. So, like, and the reality is you're not starting over in diapers, right? You're starting over with 40 years of wisdom and knowledge learned. So don't squander that.
Yeah.
You have another lifetime, right? It's not over. And I think sometimes that we get into that idea of, like, hey, retirement 60, 65, and then I just kind of coast. It's like, that's a second win, right? That's your chance to, maybe you're not going to be doing the same kind of work that you did for the first 60, whatever it will look like. But here's another chance to say, what's next, right? What do I have to offer the world in this season of life? Maybe it's by telling people what not to do, right? Maybe feel like you gain all these lessons, and you have these, like, hey, if I could go back, I'd do this, this, and this, and we'll pass that on, right? And that's exciting, man. So, yeah, I hear something else coming through here. You shared, like, growing up, like, your just desire to want to please others. And in one sense, that's good. Like, we should want to please others. We should want to make people happy. I think that's a good impulse. But what you're saying is where that went wrong for you was it became it came at the expense of eventually not figuring out what was actually making you happy.
Yeah.
And there's a way in which that can actually be a form of slavery, where we're constantly, all of our decisions, everything else we're doing is all like, well, it moved from wanting to please others and bring joy to others to being so afraid of what other people think, what their opinion is, and what are they going to think if I do this? And it becomes a hyperbole in a sense of, like, how we live our lives now, and we become dictated by people's opinions, other people's opinions. Do you feel like that's where it came for you at a spot?
Yeah, I think...
or if it didn't, like, totally cool.
No, one thing, like, kind of a parallel I'll make with that, just a thought that I had, was kind of in an Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn world, right, where they put the little thumbs up button, the like button on all of it, or the little heart on Instagram. There's a lot of people that build a following because of what other people click the heart for, or what other people click the thumbs up button for, right? So, consuming some content, you talk about, like, this, fitness buff who puts out a shirtless picture of himself, super ripped and jacked up, and he gets 14,000 likes, right? But really deep down, he wants to talk about how he's all plant-based and he doesn't believe in meat, or maybe he believes in all meat, whatever his story is, like his heart, whatever his heart's. But whenever he posts about that, he gets 13 likes. He doesn't get very much. So in order to grow his brand and build his awareness, he keeps taking shirtless pictures because he's a ripped dude and he looks great and it fulfills him.
Well, that's why I take shirtless pictures.
Right, I know, that's exactly. I was going to tell you to tone that down on LinkedIn. It gets a little weird, but
I like the likes.
But so he's building that kind of like that false. Yes, he's getting a lot of followers. Yes, he's getting a lot of likes, and it's kind of giving him that dopamine hit every time he opens Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and he sees that 30,000 people like this stuff. But deep down, he's not fulfilled. He's not truly living his purpose on who he likes to be, and I would kind of use that parallel as the first. When you're so focused on everybody else's likes of you, right? Because there's kind of those thumbs up, heart buttons in real life too, and doing things so that other people like you, but it necessarily doesn't kind of fit in that harmony of all your circles coming together.
Yeah.
You can kind of create a false person that isn't true who you are, true to your core. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. So not quite what I was saying earlier. It's more of like, is what you're saying, does your message align with their values and your purpose and mission in life, right? And in your example of like, I mean, we see that all over Instagram, especially Instagram, like people posting pictures. Now we don't know in a sense why they do it, but if you read through some of the stuff, it's like, okay, yeah, here's this guy, he's doing all this kind of stuff, but here's what his mission is, right? But why does he only get the 13 likes for that,
Right.
And he gets the 14,000 number for this, right? And then that can start to influence the things that we give our time and attention to, rather than staying true to the mission, true to what matters to us, true to the message we feel like we have to give to the world. That's good. Okay. Yeah. Was there a time in your life that you felt like that was true for you?
I mean, only the first 31 years.
I would imagine if that's something. I mean, we would probably wrestle with the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like.
Yep.
Like in one sense, we're built to want to be able to help other people and bring joy to them, right? So when we see that we did something to cause that effect, but the caution is, the danger is getting swept away with caring about that effect when it breaks away from our mission, our message, something completely different that we're not trying to do. We get swept into a completely different purpose, a completely different life.
Yeah, I think like with a lot of things, right? Things are good in small doses. So whether it's, you do have to have the sense of that serving others and being, like, you have to take into consideration what other people think, because you don't want to just walk around and be a self-absorbed, what.
Right.
But, it's like indulging in desserts, for example. A little bit of dessert isn't a bad thing, because mentally, it's good for you to have that indulgence. But if you're going to eat cupcakes every single day, it's probably not going to be great for your long-term health. There's kind of that little bit of a give and take with everything, and I think the same serves true with a lot of entrepreneurial concepts and just life in general.
Yeah, that's good, man.
Well, it is one of my main goals to give you more in use value than what I take from you in cash value. And so, man, I love that this podcast is for free. And I really hope that you are finding just incredible value. Who knows, maybe in one of these episodes, you'll take an idea that will be worth $1 million to you. And that's so awesome. If you believe in this and what we're doing here and you'd like to give, you can go to patreon.com/whatnottodo and you can give according to your heart's desire. But seriously, every little bit helps in our mission to equip the world for success. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay. Anything else you want to share on that whole idea? It's some really good stuff. Fun hearing your story and hearing a few different stories come out of that.
Yeah, man, I think the other thing that I wrote down that I really want is a failure of not developing discipline early on in life. And I think now as parents and business owners, I think it's our job to, I think discipline can be taught to an extent through work ethic that you see, right? You talked earlier about You know, you saw great work ethic instilled early on. My dad was a business owner, and I saw that great work ethic. But I honestly didn't have a lot of... I grew up in a small town, played sports, naturally was gifted to be one of the top athletes on all my teams. Didn't really have to work that hard at it. So I didn't really have that discipline. Like, I could get to the 80% piece, but I wasn't really interested in going from the 80% to 100. And if I would have focused on that 80% to 100, right, the 80-20 principle, if I would have focused on that next 20%, maybe I would have had a longer career in basketball through college. Maybe I'd still be playing basketball today. You know,
be on the bench, right?
Right, I'd still be riding the bench, but maybe making money at it, you know, whatever.
Come on.
So instilling that discipline, I think that's something kind of going back to the common theme of failures is just not... You don't know... I can look back and see it now. I didn't know it in the moment. But take that and develop and cultivate that discipline because, you know, discipline's going to get you a long way when it's time to wake up and maybe you're sick and you don't feel like recording that next podcast. But it's that next podcast that inspires that next person who then takes the role and starts their own podcast and impacts 400 million people, and your goal is to impact 1 billion, and you just impacted 400 million indirectly by inspiring that person to go start a podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, interesting. So it's like there's that temptation to crutch on our natural abilities. And I mean, like, I look at it, well, I don't know I've heard the saying before, and I think a lot of different people have said it. But like coaches in sports would say, I would rather take I'd rather take the Tom Brady, who wasn't very naturally talented or gifted as an athlete, but he was an extremely disciplined and hard worker. I'd rather take him. And I'd put more money on him and bet on him than the guy who was extremely talented, maybe from a DNA perspective, natural ability, gifted, but lazy, right? And just kind of relied on his natural abilities to do things rather than a systematized, disciplined approach and effect to maximize and really build on whatever athletic foundation he had, right? Whatever natural abilities he had. And I think that's an important lesson. We all need to hear that because we all bring, as a result of our environments from an early growing up, if it's athletic stuff, maybe it's a DNA thing, right? But the things that we're exposed to have shaped us. That, you know, like I'm a musician. You know, I grew up in a musical family, and the way that has shaped me. You can stack me up against a lot of folks, and in general, I can outperform them in some different capacities. And that's not me being like, oh, I'm so great. It's really playing back to say, look, I grew up in a musical family, right? Like before I was born, I was hearing stuff in the womb. You know, like I'm coming out shaped, and we're singing at nursing homes when I'm 2 and 3 years old, and I'm up on the stage in front of people. So like, who I am today had to do with that, and how many people had that experience? Well, not many. So you can understand or the different experiences. Like, right, if your dad was an entrepreneur, that shaped you. Huge. And so it's like we're such a product of our environments in so many ways, which is a really, really good thing, and it also helps us to understand where some of our natural abilities have really come from, right? Why are we so good at this thing when we grew up here, right? Or did this, that, the other thing. But as we grow older, when we start to compete and all that kind of stuff, the temptation is to crutch on our natural abilities and to stop cultivating them. Dude, I did that with guitar. Like, I started playing guitar when I was 5 years old, right? So, like, I've been playing guitar for 28 years. And you hear that, it's like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not even 28 years old. Or, like, that's a lifetime, right? Yeah, but I'm nowhere near as good as I should be. Yeah. I took lessons, my dad taught me for a year. I took lessons for 13 years. And then I kind of just stopped. And I was content with, like, who I was. And then, a year here, and I kind of went back into it more and all that kind of stuff. And I'm confident in my guitar playing abilities, for sure. But, man, like, I could have mastered that. In some ways, it feels like an extension of me. And, like, I can close my eyes and play. It's just an extension of who I am. But when I hear some, like, the greats out there, it's like, man, I can't do that. And after 28 years, I should be able to show for that. Why crush on my natural ability? I stopped the hard work, I stopped the disciplined approach, and I kind of coasted where I was at. And it's a good reminder in life, like, not to do that, right? As long as we're fogging the mirror, like, let's continue to cultivate the skills and abilities that we have and use them, find ways to be able to use them for the sake of others.
Yeah, and maybe on the flip side of that, even contradicting myself, and even your story of the guitar, maybe that isn't meant to be your entire story also, right? Because you personally are sitting here impacting a lot of lives in this capacity, and maybe you wouldn't have been able to do that with a guitar in your hand.
Yeah.
Maybe you needed a microphone in your hand instead.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
No, guitar and a microphone. Now we're talking.
Come on.
That's going to be the next segment of this, is you're going to be playing the guitar the entire time you're interviewing on a podcast. I think that's the next level here.
Actually, I've thought about doing a podcast for music. I don't know exactly the concept, but like I don't know if it's been done, but like to have a podcast where I just kind of talk maybe about a song and then I play and sing the song. Right? I don't know if that'd be if people even like that or if that'd be a thing, but like I've had the idea, right? So
hey, there's a kid that made a podcast about Vikings.
Right.
There's somebody that made a podcast about Smurfs. I think like a musical podcast is going to be fine. I think you could do it. You could totally do it.
So I think that's huge. Don't crutch on natural abilities. It seems like when we say don't crutch on natural abilities, that doesn't mean don't use them. Like you're right, like to use the skills that you had, right? Like that's what you did right, and definitely like whatever natural abilities you bring to the table, use them, right? But where that can go wrong for us is when we stop there. We don't seek to expand them, to learn to grow, because and maybe it's a pride thing. Maybe like it's like, oh, I'm so good at guitar, I don't have to really push anymore. I'm better than most of the people I come across, so I've made it. Well, when we get to that point in our pride and we start to believe the hype about us and drink that all in, I think that just undercuts the whole thing, right? And then we start to regress. If we're not growing, we're dying, that type of thing.
And another distant mentor, I would say, Jeff Woods. He's the vice president of The One Thing.
Yeah.
And I follow him. We're part of that mastermind together. And he talks about use the guitar, for example, or for me for basketball or football. And I even kind of back to homeschooling too, like comparing our child to every other child, like is he better or worse? But the question posed is it not necessarily is it the best that Kyle can do, or is it the best that Mike can do? Is that the best that it can be done?
Yeah.
So you strive for the best that it can be done, and ultimately, most of the time, where we're at, it's not ever going to be the best that it can be done. You know what I mean? There's always another level. There's always, so for basketball, for example, just because I was better than the 17 other guys that went out for basketball that year, that doesn't mean I played basketball the best that basketball could be played. That's why LeBron James is still constantly trying to get better 17 years into the NBA and not just treating it like, hey, I'm better than, 99% of everybody else, so he's good. No, he still works every offseason. Tom Brady still works every offseason because it's not the best that their craft can be played.
Yeah, Kobe Bryant was like that, and you channel that energy into like, I'm going to be better, right? And that's actually, so I'm a Packer guy through and through, but Patriots are my second favorite team.
Cool.
A lot of people unsubscribing right now.
Right, just lots of clicks.
But it has to do with what they've done from an organizational perspective, building out this system of excellence, that where you dominate two decades. Come on. But then I love Tom Brady. A lot of people call him arrogant. Like the dude, he's not a naturally gifted quarterback. And like there's talk about him like maybe going to another team. I don't know that he would be great with another team.
Yeah.
Because like he learned a system, got plugged into a system, and has his entire work ethic and discipline around that system to try to change 20 years of fitting in that system. He could do it, but because he's not necessarily like an Aaron Rodgers, as far as like natural ability, it might be really hard for him to pivot at this point in his career. But I really respected and loved like all that he brings to the table, and found his dedication, his focus to his craft just super inspiring. And it's made me realize, hey, I can't just rely on natural abilities, whatever they might be, right? And not look at those things as bad things, but say, let's cultivate, let's keep bringing them on, right? And find ways to be able to get better. And just see that as like, the more that I get better, the better I get. Maybe that's the grammatical way to say it. The better I can serve the world around me. Right? I can serve my family and the world around me. Why wouldn't I want to get to this place? Why would I think that this is enough, right? Like I want to be able to give so much, and the more I can give, the happier that makes me. I know it's going to come back to me and to be a blessing to our family and etc. And I love hearing you say that, and I think that's a great question to ask. Is this the best I can do, or is this the best that can be done? Those are two very different questions. And one seems to have like kind of like a a scarcity mindset, and the other is like an abundance mindset.
Yeah.
Right? Like that first question, is it the best I can do? Kind of scarcity, like I'm the only one, and here are my natural limitations, and that's all I can get. Here's my ceiling, and that's it. I stop here. Or versus taking the ceiling off and saying, is this the best that can be done? Right? Where could this go? And I'm thankful for guys like Steve Jobs, right? That didn't say, well, it's never been done before. Like he said, what can be done?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember a quote, a Henry Ford quote that talked about, Steve Jobs, one of the most influential visionaries of our time, right? Creating what we're recording this on.
Yeah.
And a Henry Ford quote said that if I would have asked the people for what they wanted, they would have told me they wanted faster horses. And faster horses wasn't the answer, right? So he obviously look at where we're not, sitting out there saying giddy up and down the roads here in De Pere. So. Oh
yeah, totally. And even building out, an 8-cylinder engine, right? 8-block engine or whatever.
Yeah.
It couldn't be done, right? And he was told it can't be done. He's like, I don't care. Take the time and resources, it will be done, right? And that's a fundamental question that we always are finding in our house. Rephrasing is not it can't be done, but how can it be done?
Yep.
Right? Not we can't do that or that won't work. It's we can do that or how can we do that or how can we make it work? Right? Fundamental different question. It seems small, but it's kind of like when two planes are starting out side by side, but have a 1% variance in their trajectory. They end up 1,000 miles apart, right?
Yeah.
And I think mindset is everything there as far as how we think about things and come to the table. Is it the best we can do versus the best we can be done will get you to two very, very different places.
100%.
And especially that latter question will help you to go farther than you ever thought possible.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
I agree, man.
Dude, love it, man. So much good stuff. All right, so we've talked about environment and things that shape us. So I'm curious, man, for you to point in life, a lot of different folks that have been impactful for you, no doubt. A lot of different things, folks that you've met, folks that you haven't met, and folks come to mind just from based off what you've shared. But I'm curious for you, man, and in your perspective, who has had such an influence and impact in your life that if you took them out of the equation, you wouldn't be the Mike Higgins that you are today?
Yeah, I think hands down easy for me is my grandpa. He grew up, he's born in 1940, and so his parents, Depression era, he's kind of the Depression era coming out of it, right? But just a guy that he worked extremely hard for his family as a farmer, and then he was a CNC machinist guy, and he was probably he's one of the main reasons that I even went to college. I was the first kid in my family tree to go to college and graduate college, which is really cool.
Cool.
Hindsight's a complete and total waste of time for me personally, but that's another conversation for a different podcast, right? But a lot of life lessons that shaped kind of who I became, and whether the advice was, the advice to go to college, which I can look at and be like, that was some of the worst, advice that I've ever gotten, because college was completely useless for me. But it also taught me how to persevere and get through something, and how to accomplish, kind of having a big task and overcoming it, right, and accomplishing it. So you can go both sides on it, and just a lot of different principles that he's instilled in me over the years. There's a lot of different. My parents have obviously been have had a huge impact in my life. My wife has had an amazing impact in my life. And, football coaches. I remember a big lesson that I learned in high school. So I transferred to a school as a junior in high school, went to Niagara High School, and I was an athlete in high school, right? Like in small schools, when you're the best athlete, typically the better athletes play the prime positions, right? They're the point guards, they're the quarterbacks, they're the running backs, they're the receivers, whatever. The people that are going to have an impact on the game. And I remember Mr. St. Arnold told me my junior year when we were starting two-a-day practices, he said, Mike, trying to figure out where I'm going to play in this offense at the new school. And he said, Mike, we can put you at tight end and in a running-based offense, right? And for those of you that are listening that have no desire in sports, I apologize. But the lesson that he taught me, which I don't think he knew it at the time, and I've never really articulated it until today, was he said, Mike, we can put you at tight end, and you can be a good tight end, and you can help the team win some games. You can catch some touchdown passes, whatever. You won't get a lot of opportunity. That's not the way our offense is designed. He said, or we can put you at left tackle, and you'll be first team all conference this year and next year, and we're going to win a lot of games. And in that moment, it was my opportunity to say, what I mentally thought I was designed for was to be the flashy tight end receiver guy that was catching passes, wasn't the best position for the betterment of the team the next 2 years. So and also it was, that position wasn't going to get me the accolades potentially down the road. And it's crazy, but I'm 6'2", I'm 184 pounds. I weigh about the same as I did in high school. I played left tackle throughout my high school. You wouldn't believe me. Not many people would look at me and say, that's a left tackle.
I was going to say, yeah.
You know what I mean? But I was first team all-conference left tackle. We had the leading rusher in the state my senior year. And we were, outside of our running back tearing his ACL last game of the season, we had an amazing team. And it was that lesson that he taught me in that moment was selflessness, right? To put the team first. And that's why I think there's such a big parallel to sports and entrepreneurship and teams and businesses, is that might be your role in that team for the betterment of the team isn't maybe exactly what you anticipated your role looking like, if that makes sense. So, a lot of mentors, man.
Love it. And it reminds me of in the Patriots Stadium when you walk in for the players in their entrance, they have a sign that says, do your job, work hard, be aware, and put the team first. And that's what's caused them to dominate over 20 years, is that everyone shows up and does their job, and they work really, really hard at doing their job, executing there. They're aware of what's happening around them and how they fit into the whole, and that they're putting the team first. And man, like if there aren't like life principles there,
right.
Like exactly what you were just saying, and that's so cool to hear your story. Yeah, 6'2", 184, like that's not a common, size for a tackle. You know what I'm saying? But how huge that is, and just the lessons that you're reaping from that, which is cool. And again, maybe the coach, to your point, wasn't aware that what he was teaching you, but nevertheless was, which is so cool. So
yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm really excited to share with you that What Not to Do has been gaining traction and momentum and experiencing some early wins, which is super exciting, and reminded me this show is about you, it's for you, and I couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. If you're part of a company, if you own a company, and you think your message would be really, really relevant and valuable to the folks that are part of this community, entrepreneurs, leaders, public figures, and those aspiring as such, reach out to me. My contact info is in the show notes, and we can sit down and consider what it would look like to partner together in equipping the world for success.
All right, man. I know you're jotting this down before, but worst advice you've ever heard?
This caused me so much stress, knowing that I was coming on this podcast and I didn't have a solid answer.
Maybe it's because you gave the worst advice, right?
You're right. That could have. No.
That'd be a question.
When we were talking earlier, it just hit me. It hit me instantly, and I know exactly what it was. And I remember the exact spot. I was in 7th grade. I was sitting on the stage in our high school gym, because we're a small school, so your performance stage is actually in your gym. We didn't have cool auditoriums back then. But I was a manager on the basketball team, and I was always, being an only child, I was always around older people. Like I just naturally, whether it was adults or I was the manager of the basketball team, so I was always around the older high schooler kids. And I remember sitting on the stage, and I would always ask tons of questions. Like to the point where it annoyed people, apparently. And one of the players looked over at me and said, "Man, you gotta stop asking so many questions. It's annoying." And that that is probably some of the worst advice I think that you can have, is because your life is made up of how good of the questions that you can ask. And if you don't ask great questions, you're never going to find great answers. And your whole life is all about asking questions. Even the question we talked about before is that the best that it can be done? But what I've learned in that is that asking great questions has allowed me to build great relationships with people, because I'm good at talking to people. And you in this podcast, you ask great questions. Like, great questions get great answers. And those answers are what we're looking at to help change lives, right? So if you don't ask questions, you're not going to get the answers. And so it's funny how that hit me as in our conversation of how, I took that advice and I did it for a while. I remember being like, I was very timid around the basketball team after that, to not ask so many questions. But, you look at your kids, you look at my kids, you look at, they're constantly asking questions. And if they don't ask questions, they're not learning.
Yeah. And the importance is asking the right questions, right? Because sometimes we ask the wrong questions. But to your point, don't be afraid to ask questions. And then from there, move on. Once you're asking questions, then work on asking the right questions. And a good mentor, good coach, can really, good father can help us to think through the right questions to ask, right? And to your point, the wrong, asking questions would be like, is this the best I can do? Asking the right questions would be, is this the best it can be done?
Yep.
And there's that qualitative difference. So just start quantitatively asking questions, but then move from a quantitative asking questions to quality questions, right? And then ask a lot of quality questions.
Yeah.
And your life will change.
100%.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Good, love it. Okay, so rush hour in every major city in the world. De Pere, Wisconsin, to Appleton, to Beijing, to Hong Kong, to London, and billions of people in just a traffic jam, right? And they're listening to this episode of What Not to Do with Mike Higgins, and they look up and they see a billboard, and wouldn't you know it, it's Mike Higgins' billboard. How ironic. What message do they see, Mike? What message do you want the world to see?
First off, I'd be in a Speedo on that. No, I'm just kidding.
But seriously.
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, and I've been excited for this question, but it would be build your legacy. And I really believe that, Gary Keller's a quote that he had said, you're never more than 5 years away from everything that you've ever wanted in life. And
That's so awesome.
You can look at that in a lot of, look at a bunch of 5-year gaps. I talked about my story earlier. From where we were, maybe just on our financial snapshot, 5 years from now, or from then, we're in a completely different place than we were spiritually, health-wise. But God gave us talents and gifts and designed us that we can build that legacy. And that, like we said earlier, that legacy is going to be built and left regardless.
Yeah.
But what people don't realize is that you have the opportunity to decide what it is and then go build it. And that would be build your legacy, would be exactly what the billboard said. Maybe with your face on it, because you're better looking. You have a great beard.
With me maybe winking with a cup of coffee.
There you go.
Dude, I love it, man. That's great. And like I said before, I think that's a huge takeaway from our conversation is it's not whether or not you're building a legacy or you're leaving a legacy. It's that you are living a legacy right now.
Yep.
You are constructing and building it right now. So the question is, what kind of legacy are you building? And will it have been worth it? Will it be of any value to the world after you leave? Right? And I think if we start to think about in life, what kind of value will our lives leave the world after the fact, it helps us to change the way that we're living now.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we all need to think more like that, right? Cool, man. That's awesome. Okay. Bonus rounds. I'm curious, 3 books that you think, they don't have to be your favorite, but that you think would be really, really impactful for people to read. and that they should probably read sooner or later, or their lives are going to continue to suffer for it.
Yeah, man. I got these written down. Number one that I had is How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of the first personal development books that I've ever read, and the key principles. It literally, the book is literally about exactly what the title says: How to Win Friends and Influence People. And not to the point of what we were talking about before, is living your life only for other people, because I think there's a definite difference there. But it kind of, to the best of the book can, helps people understand people, and just the psychology behind that. And I remember reading that book first, my very first personal development book, and it was a game changer, and it kind of set me off on the trajectory of going down this rabbit hole that we call personal development. Another book, a friend of our mastermind and the dad's, is The Miracle Morning by Elrod. It's an awesome book, and I think a lot of high-performing entrepreneurs and high-performing people will tell you that you can win the morning, you win the day. So this book talks all about kind of mastering that morning routine, and some days are better than others. There's 365 mornings in a year, and I would be lying to you if I said I nail 365 mornings every year.
But 364 is pretty good,
right? Right, exactly. And that's what I did. I just missed one. But I think the way that you set out your day, consciously prepare your day, and execute that morning is what sets you up to have a good day, an okay day, or a bad day. And, there's a lot of times you can get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you can get 3 hours worth of work done before the rest of the world even wakes up. So that's another great one. And one that I just recently read a couple months ago by Ben Hardy, is called Willpower Doesn't Work. That's an awesome book. We talked a little bit about environment, and it's all about how your different environments can set up, how that impacts you, kind of from... Long story short is we have a finite amount of discipline and willpower, but if we set up our environment for success, great example, if you're focused on health, set your house up to be focused on that goal. Don't have chocolate chip cookies everywhere, because you're not going to have the willpower at 9:30 at night to not reach in that bag and pull out a chocolate chip cookie. But if you set the environment up where you have an apple on the counter instead of a chocolate chip cookie, you're either going to not eat it because you hate apples, or you're not going to eat anything because it's not there. So Willpower Doesn't Work was a great book, definitely a game changer that somebody should go out and buy or listen to Audible right now.
Cool, love it. It reminds me of some of the things that James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits. Have you read that book?
No.
Yeah, you'd probably really enjoy that. But that idea of I would think it's we just have to be, overcome, from a strength or will perspective. It's actually just designing our environments to appeal to the things that, appeal to us, or that we'd want to appeal to us. Like if we have a bad habit, we want to replace it with a good habit. Well, let's make that good habit present and appeal to us, like a bowl of apples out on the counter, right?
Yeah.
And take away the cookies, right? That's
and
cool.
you talked about it the other day. I saw a post of yours about a book that you were reading, and you kind of designed your system to be like, if you have white space or some downtime, that's your system, is to pull out a book and read. Like you've created that environment. So instead of just mindlessly scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, you're creating the environment to set yourself up for success, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. I had a meeting get canceled, right? It happens, right? Well, I've got 4 books in my bag at all times.
Yeah.
And depending on maybe what I'm feeling in that moment, let's dig back into this one, I think it's important because I think it's just a way of making good use of the time. And it is planning for the unplanned, right? And there's only so much you can do there, but yeah, if you got 15, 30 minutes or a meeting that canceled, now you got an hour or two, what would you do? Maybe you have other work you could do. Or maybe, hey, I can get extra reading in today. That's going to be a good investment for, et cetera. So, love it, man. That's awesome. Yeah. This has been awesome.
It's been really cool.
It's been a fantastic morning. Okay, so if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, they wanted to do business with Kos Realty Group, or they wanted to just pick your brain about homeschooling, or have her family over for dinner, or get you a cup of coffee, man, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think all the platforms that this is going to be on, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, just Mike Higgins. My profile picture pretty consistent across all brands. Look us up at the Kos Realty Group. We got a lot of cool things that are going on. We're doing a lot of new construction, new building, and from a homeschool perspective, I'd love that if anybody reached out and had questions. I think that's why we're here. We're to serve, and if you guys got questions on that, and being around more like-minded individuals like yourself and other listeners of this podcast, I look forward to that opportunity to talk to people.
Cool. Awesome. And that's the best way they connect with you on any of those platforms. They shoot you a message or all that kind of stuff. Better
or
than email or anything.
Mike at KosRealtyGroup.com is another one. So, and I know you'll probably link to that all, because you're a fancy show notes guy like that.
Hey, it's good. I think it's just a good way, and it's been fun. I mean, I've heard more and more people are connecting. People are finding mentors and encouragement. People are doing business. It's just cool. Like, I love that. I love that people are connecting through this, and that's one of the great goals of this. So, awesome,
that's how
man.
we got connected.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. So, okay, cool. Dude, this has been so great. We're going to turn off the mic here and probably keep talking. So,
perfect.
Anyway, thanks, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Great conversation with the Mike Higgins. Great guy, just a fantastic gent across the board. If you get to know him, you're going to love him. He's just one of those guys. All right, let's recap and see what Mike told us not to do. First, don't ignore the whole man. Don't ignore the whole man. We have this tendency to want to kind of chop up life, right? In this category here, this category there, this bucket here, this bucket there. And, I hate to break the news to you, but the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. There is such a thing as synergy. And when you have all the moving parts working together, that's where you get that beautiful working whole. And you can't just reduce it down to its mere parts. And so when it's coming to caring for ourselves, those around us, you have to treat the whole man. Do not ignore the whole man, right? Life isn't as easy or simple as, putting our days and times in the day into buckets or a time block. It's not that simple. And so don't ignore the whole man. Secondly, don't focus on one thing. Don't focus on one thing. Wink, wink, nod, nod type of deal. You heard in the conversation here, yes, you have to focus on one thing, right? And you need to go all in on that one thing. But that doesn't mean that's the only thing in life that you ever focus on, right? In the book, The One Thing, Gary Keller gives us, 7 different things to focus on, as we talked about in this conversation. But the point here is don't focus on one thing, meaning it's eclipsing the rest of the important things in life. And this kind of harmonizes with that first not to do of don't ignore the whole man, right? So yes, focus in on one thing, but do not focus in on one thing at the expense of all the other one things that you ought to have in life. Hope that makes sense. Next, don't forget the message. Don't forget the message. There can be a way in which we're trying to get something across, and we are so worried about how we're just so worried on the message and that particular thing that we're not even giving a thought to how we deliver it. Generally speaking, you've got container and you've got content, right? Container and content, both matter. The container contents, the container matters. What's what the message is in, but the content itself matters as well. The message itself, right? You need to get both right. Both matter, container and content. So don't forget the message when you're worried and focused so much on trying to package it and put a bow on it and make it look really, really good. Make sure the message is still there. Make sure the method and the message, the container and the content align. Last but not least, don't crutch on your abilities. Don't crutch on your natural abilities. By all means, lean into them. They are your strengths. But in Mike's case here, we can tend to lean on those too much to where we just stop working, we stop practicing, we stop getting better, and then soon we find out others are better than us, right? So who would you put your money on? Someone that just had incredible natural talent, like an Aaron Rodgers, right? Or someone who had to work really, really, really hard, like a Tom Brady, right? So that's a massive conversation, probably just open up a can of worms. I'm a big Rodgers fan, but also a big Brady fan, and they couldn't be more different in their approach to the game in a lot of ways, but both obviously excellent players, and Brady has the rings to show for it. So don't crutch on natural abilities. Work. and constantly improving. We say this a lot on the show, but as long as you can fog a mirror, you should be cultivating what you bring to the table, your skills, your gifts, your abilities, and unleash them in service to the world around you. That's huge. I love this question that Mike asked. He said, is that the best I can do versus is it the best it can be done? Right? So one question is that the best I can do? A better question is it the best it can be done? Right? What's good, I think, about considering is it the best that I can do? Great. But if it can be done even better, that means your best isn't good enough and you've got room to improve. You got room to grow, which is really, really exciting. So those are two really powerful questions to ask. Not just is that the best I can do, but also is it the best that can be done? And then how can I do it? How can I get it done? How can I be the one to do it best, right? And go there. Well, I want to thank you for listening. This podcast is about you. It's for you. I couldn't do it without you. You guys are so awesome. I mean, man, we're in 18 countries, 210 cities around the globe. It's just phenomenal. The listenership is growing, expanding, super, super exciting. So thank you so much for liking this, for sharing it, and continue to do so. If it's been impactful to you, a great way you can do that is leave us a good 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to. And I want to hear from you guys. Let me know who you like on the show. We got a lot of fun folks coming up, a lot of very cool experiences, a lot of very cool failures to talk about. I'm so excited to share all these stories with you. It's just a blast. And I love what I do. It's the greatest thing ever. A sweet spot for me, right? But if you know someone you'd love to have on the show, or maybe that's you, let's connect. Let me know. We'll see what it would look like to tell your story on what not to do. If you're a company and you've got a story that you want to tell, you think it would be really relevant for this niche community of entrepreneurs, leaders, and public figures that's ever expanding, let's sit down. Let's talk. Let's talk what a partnership would look like and how we can best tell your story. Well, it's been said that good men learn from their own mistakes, but great men, they learn from the mistakes of others. So go and be great, and we'll see you next time.